Good evening, folks. How are we doing? This is Julien Masson from Adrenaline Combatives, and I am with Jared Wihongi. Is that the
Yeah,
right way to pronounce it?
yep, that's good. Yep.
All right, Jared. Where's that name coming from?
So my last name is a Maori name, the native people of New Zealand, where my father's from. So it's Maori. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Yeah, you and I spoke about the tribes before and the different. You guys even got some martial arts.
There are some
Yeah.
remnants of the old martial arts. A lot of the traditional one, the native arts have been lost to time, but there are some of them that are kept in a very traditional manner. So we're kind of fortunate
Mm.
that way compared to other Pacific peoples.
You see, this is sad. This is really sad when some culture, especially the martial arts. I know we're passionate about martial arts. It's very sad when some of that stuff is getting lost in time.
It
Uh,
is. It is. A lot of it, it's just it has been lost for a long time, and a lot of it, I think
mm,
is being lost. And I'm one of those like you. I'm one of the people that would like to see those being preserved. Yeah,
yeah, and then you might have a person somewhere that nobody knows about that has carried on that legacy. That have been taught from generation to generation, and they might not even. They might just kind of teach it to the close circle or just to a certain select few people, and most people don't even hear about it. Uh,
that's often the case. Yeah, a lot of these arts that have hopefully come out of obscurity, but a lot of them are kept that way and sometimes die out because they aren't
mm,
opened up to other people. So yeah.
yeah. So, Jared, do you want to give us a quick introduction about who you are, what you do, for those that don't know you?
Sure. Yeah. So I was raised in New Zealand, my father's native land, and my mother's American, and I've been here in the States now for most of my life, the last 30 years. My professional background is in law enforcement, so I've got in total 23 years of law enforcement, about half full time and half as a reserve officer. 20 of that working in SWAT teams. And I also was a full-time academy instructor, and so that's my professional background. As in the martial arts, I would guess you could say my forte is the Filipino martial arts. It's
Yeah.
something I've always been attracted to weaponry, and when I found a martial art that is centered on weapons, I really took to it. But I've also trained in my lifetime several other arts, Muay Thai, boxing,
Hmm.
jiu-jitsu, and other
Yeah,
things, because I just see the value and that every art can bring to the plate.
absolutely.
So yeah, that's kind of my background in a nutshell. I now am a full-time instructor. I still reserve as an officer here in the state of Utah, but
Okay.
I travel the world teaching between traditional Filipino martial arts seminars and then my more combative self-defense based program, what I call TRICOM. And so
Tricon,
that's
yeah.
kind of what I do full-time now. Yeah.
Nice one. Nice. I actually, yeah, I've been watching some of your videos. They circulate online and you see who is doing what. And I'm very much into combatives. I love combatives. And I thought to myself, there was some pretty cool stuff, like where you bring the certain aspect of the Filipino martial arts into a compact package, which is more like I'd say principle based and concept based rather than technical based, which is what I like about combatives. It's all, once you understand the principles and the concept, then you create your own way of moving. It's all about,
Absolutely.
getting
Exactly.
done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then my experience as an academy instructor, and also I did several years I was contracted as an Army Special Forces combatives instructor, and I
Mhm.
had to kind of figure out those ways to teach. A martial artist that has a different kind of a learning journey than someone that's just wearing a uniform and isn't really a martial artist. And so finding ways to teach people in those professions things that they might need in a very short period of time. It
Yes.
takes a little bit. It has to be principle based. Otherwise, you're just kind of spinning your wheels. So yeah,
That is the thing when you teach people that don't necessarily have a lot of time to train. So you got to install that skill set on their hard drive as efficiently as possible and as quickly as possible, knowing that these guys, they're going to be using that stuff pretty much. I mean, they're going to be learning with you, but really the real learning will be on the field. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's where the real experience is. And especially in law enforcement, where you've got a profession where in most parts of the world. Officers don't get a lot of time to train. They're just not given that time. It's not, and
Yeah.
so a lot of it is learning them from the school of hard knocks, and sometimes
Yeah.
it's not the best way to learn. If you've got a good combination of the two, obviously you need that experience also, but it's good if you actually have some skills that you can hone in through experience. Is a much better combination.
It's true. When you look, sometimes it's even a bit sad and regrettable that law enforcement are not getting enough training, and sometimes it results in an overuse of force. When you see a lot of videos circulating online of police officers that resort to impactive options
Mhm.
rather than control and restraints and things like that, that they should know that stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's unfortunate. But no, it's good that some people like yourself, I can relate to that because, as I said to you, my father had a very similar path as well. He was an instructor in the CRS, in the French CRS,
Yep.
which are like anti-riot, like police forces. And yeah, I was lucky enough, I was fortunate enough to assist him in Eastern Europe as I was growing up for a good 7 years. So that was pretty cool. And so it's sure that these guys need the training, and so we'll go through. I got some really cool questions for you, man. Uh,
Well, hopefully, I've got some cool answers. We'll see.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Answer the way that you want. There's no taboo on here, man. So, what type of training methodology do you think is the best to teach combatives? So, you look, for example, and are you going to answer? But look, for example, from my point of view, I kind of divide this into three or four main aspects where I go the technical development, which is the development of the technique, and then the attribute development, which is a development of attributes in order to get the technique more sharper. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then we move on to fight development, where now we put it into situations and simulations, gradually getting to full contact simulations against padded assailants and things like that. And the
Yeah.
mindset development, which is all the psychological elements going with it. So is that something similar to the way you see things?
Very similar, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you've got, and I usually will base kind of a methodology off of, I kind of based on time availability, and I'll,
Yeah.
and I use a kind of a triage type of a methodology of, what
Mm.
if you don't have a lot of time, what I think you should be learning first, and base the methodology off that. And then if you've got more time, I start adding things based on how I see how important I believe it might be, based on whatever the profession is of the group I'm training. It differs because you've got, from soldiers to security officers to executive protection to police officers and so on and so
Different
forth.
rules of engagement. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And those rules of engagement might not be just profession based. They may be based on the country that you're in. Every country doesn't have the same, not only
Yeah.
the rules, the laws, but the
Mhm.
norms, the cultural norms, what's acceptable and what's not. And so that's something I have to try and figure out as best I can, when I'm teaching in
Mm.
different parts of the world. But I'll base it off of that. But just like you mentioned, I mean, methodology wise, I like to focus things off of, I'm a big believer in, first and foremost, very gross motor movement,
Yeah.
trying to find things that aren't too complex, aren't too
Mhm.
sophisticated, and so that people can learn them faster. So, because you've got sophisticated skills that can work, they just take more time to perfect and be able to get them
Yes.
to where you can actually use them. Whereas, more gross motor movement, the more you can kind of tap into that, then the easier it becomes for people to learn in shorter periods of time. And I'm always trying to meet the two goals of
Yeah.
functionality and retainability, because
Yes.
there's,
That's a big
if you
one.
don't, it could be very functional, but it's so complex, it's not
Yeah.
retainable. And if I'm only training this one day and I don't train again for another year, then you may be just, again, giving people a bunch of stuff that's cool, but next week they've forgotten what you what you
Yeah.
told them. So
It's
yeah.
it's interesting. It's interesting what you're saying. Like, there's always that talk about gross motor skills, and then you got people that kind of disagree with it. And I like to have a look at both sides sometime of an argument. Yeah, but so why gross motor skills? Because obviously when there is the adrenal dump, the cognitive shift, and the blood kind of shunted away from the extremities, which makes it difficult to perform any movement that requires eye-hand coordination, hand dexterity, and things like that. So
Yeah.
for people that have difficulties dealing with the adrenal dump, people that are not desensitized to that stuff. So we're not talking about doormen, we're not talking about police officers or soldiers that they know their adrenaline, they know how that shit works. For people, of course, that have a limited amount of time, that just want to learn something that's got more probability of working, then gross motor skills, like big caveman movements, I think are great. And
Yeah.
for sure, we train a lot of that stuff in combatives. But now, for somebody that's got more time to train, I think boxing. Some people would argue that boxing is fine motor skills. I don't think that boxing is that much fine motor skills compared to things like Wing Chun or you know what I mean.
I
And so
mean, yeah. I mean, the boxing is, yeah, and I love boxing. I think it's an
boxing is amazing. Yeah.
amazing base for anyone that's looking to improve their self defense skill. But I believe it's very gross motor. But the more you get into it, and now, okay, I know the main punches, I know the main footwork, the main movements. Now you start getting into the intricacies. But if you don't have that gross motor portion first, then you shouldn't be getting into the intricacies of movement. And
True. Yeah.
so yeah, it's about pretty much as gross motor as you can get as at the base level, but it's not. It can get complex as you start, like you said, getting into some of the more intricate movements and footwork and combinations and whatnot. So
Yeah. So let's speak about counter weapon tactics, which I believe is also one thing that when you do weaponry, you gotta. I always say, if you want to learn how to deal with somebody that's got a weapon, you need to learn how to use a weapon because that gives you this combative maturity. You know what's possible. You know what you're capable of with a weapon. So you're like, straight away you stop trying all them stupid and dangerous things, straight away. And
yeah,
unfortunately, there's a lot of people doing. You can see a lot of that online.
yeah.
So when it comes to counter weapon tactics, for example, against a blade, what would you say is the most suitable principle to apply in order to go home in one piece and live to see another day?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's a good question, and it can kind of and again, there's tears to that, and there's the what ifs that you could throw in there too, and the different variables. But in general, you mentioned one thing you just mentioned was pretty much a basis of the Filipino martial arts, which is to learn to defend against the weapon. It's ideal to learn how the dynamics of using a weapon, right? And so it's just like learning to defend against a punch, but you've never trained what an actual punch is, how to throw an actual punch. It's the same dynamic, and so that is an important dynamic. Sometimes it's a luxury that some people don't have in a law enforcement type of environment where you're teaching guys to learn how to fight with knives before they learn the defense, and you just don't have time to go through those methodologies. So. But when it comes to knife defense, I kind of first I usually will start off with, well, what is the mission of the individual? Like, for example, a police officer is going to have a different mission than a husband or a father that his duty is to protect his family. A police officer has to deal with the situation and can't just run away, right?
Yeah,
Whereas
that's true. Yeah.
I may have to stay and fight, but I may also, if I can get my family to run away with me, then that is going to be my best option. I don't have to take this guy into custody. I'm out of here if I can, So, so there's things that could come into play that may be options that are not otherwise. I usually will start, if I'm looking at counter weapon tactics, you mentioned a word earlier that I use a lot, which is probabilities. Train to the probabilities. What's the highest probability tactic that's going to get me to survive this encounter? No matter how much I train, I'm not going to be a fool, because there are no absolutes in combat, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
As trained as you are, that one lucky stab that the guy might have may be the one that ends your life. So, I look at these things as universal, but disengagement when it's feasible and viable is definitely a way to go. If it's not, I'll start with, okay, what can I use as a weapon to defend myself?
Yeah.
It could be a weapon of opportunity. It could be a weapon of what I call a designated weapon, or something that an environmental weapon, something that I carry on my person that is an actual weapon. But is there a weapon available that I can use to defend myself, and increasing my probabilities and force multipliers? So I'll kind of start with that. And then I kind of start moving down. Okay, now I don't have that. What are my best empty hand tactics to defend against this individual? Gross motor movement, high probability techniques and tactics, things that, there's a lot of stuff that can work. I'm not that person who'll say, okay, this is going to work and nothing else will. There's a lot of stuff that can work. You just got to find something that is high probability and train it well. train it well. And so, and I have, in my programs, I have things that I believe meet that criteria, but I'm not,
Yeah.
the person that's going to say this is the only stuff that's going to work, because there's other things that can and will work also. But whatever you decide you're going to train it well.
Sure.
And it should meet certain criteria if it's going to be things that you're going to train. Like it needs to be realistic. It needs to be based on gross. It needs to be based on research and statistics and gross motor movement. Combination of controls, strikes. Everything that good footwork. A combination of all of the above. But so you can kind of get deeper into that. But that's kind of my viewpoint in a nutshell. Yeah.
No, you just said it, and I like the fact that you're honest about it, and I'm the same. There is no foolproof method. Somebody coming at you with a piece of metal with, the firm intention to send you to the mold. It's very, very difficult to deal with that.
Yeah.
And, you can replicate that in training by, you can train with like small plastic bottles and just tag each other like crazy and see what. It's very difficult to deal with that sort of scenario. But like you said, that's what, you got this argument between the grapplers and the strikers. And I think that anyway, you need both. You need a good striking base and a good grappling base, and then sprinkle the dirty shit on the top of it. Yeah. All the eye gouge, the rib, the fish hook, all that stuff.
Yep.
But so I think yeah, it's important when it comes to counter blades tactics or counter weapon tactics to have both these approaches of, right, okay, how do I fend, how do I block, how do I apply that 2-on-1? If I'm lucky to put that 2-on-1 without getting cut, without getting stabbed, which is very improbable, but and then what to do next? Or how do I strike? How do I parry maybe a strike to go for the knockout straight away? So yeah, these are options that are kind of viable, but you nailed it right on the head. That whatever you train, you got to train it really, really well.
Yes.
I've seen some good stuff. You guys, obviously, in the US, you got the advantage because you can carry weapons. You see, here in the UK, they took our right to arm ourselves a long time ago, and that is very difficult. I'm one of these guys. I believe that I grew up with what my father was. I grew up with firearms at home. I was on the shooting range from a young age, so I had that education. And a weapon is a tool. It's not really a weapon. The weapon is the mind, is the intention to cause deadly harm. If you don't have that, then it just becomes a tool that you can just put that weapon in a drawer or inside your safe. It's not going to hurt anyone.
Yeah.
It kind of takes the intention to turn it into a weapon.
One of the deadliest tools out there is a vehicle, but we don't ban vehicles, but they're driving all over the streets everywhere you go. So I mean, if you've got the intent, you can make anything hurt another person pretty much. It's just a matter of, like you said, it's what the intent of the individual is. And so I'm with you on that.
Is that part of what you teach? Driving, combative driving, evasive driving?
I don't teach the driving portion of that. When I was a police academy instructor, that's something that we would teach. Yes. But it's not something that, as I've gone into my own business, that's not an area that I've kind of delved into, because it's kind of a niche. It's a specialty, and there are people out there that teach that very well, and that's what they do. And so it's not an area that I've really delved into from a business standpoint. Yeah.
Okay. So from a martial art and combative training perspective, what do you have to say about the difference between the technical development and attribute development and the actual fight development, stress test, pressure testing, scenario training, simulations? There is a big difference between the two, and you kind of need both. Shinai or katana, you need both, isn't it?
Exactly. No, absolutely. That's there, and in most, in the combative side of thing, you kind of oftentimes you've got to jump into that a little sooner than you might in a martial arts environment, right? Like in a combatives environment, we may be doing that day one, because I've only got one day, so and it's an essential component. So I may be throwing people into simulated combat experiences, and that could be done in many ways. And some ways are effective, some ways I think are less effective. But it's important that is combined with the actual technical skills, so people get a chance to take what they're learning, not only just get a chance to try and utilize that under stress, but build a little bit of some confidence in their ability to do that also.
Yeah. How would you rate the importance of understanding the effect of adrenal stress, the cognitive shift, all the physiological factors that come into play? Is that something that you try to replicate in your training for your student to actually know how how it feels?
It is, yeah, it is. That's that, and that a lot again. That a lot of that comes into when you get into scenario based. Training is a great way to train that out. And when time, a lot of times, if I'm depending on time, I may only have time to do some, what I would call micro scenarios where it's
Yeah.
maybe we're skipping the whole role playing and we just jump straight into the action kind of a thing because
Mhm.
time is just not on our side.
Yeah.
I think there's a place for both because the more role playing type scenario helps people to understand when and where and if they should escalate the force and what type
Yeah.
where they should escalate to, particularly in law enforcement where you've got maybe have several weapons that you could potentially utilize and have to decide under that stress which one is appropriate to the scenario and sometimes it may be an over escalation, or maybe sometimes
Yeah.
it could be a hesitation to escalate, which gets you hurt. Hesitation is what often gets people hurt or killed. And so understanding keenly when and where you should do that. So, and then the mindset factors of,
Yeah.
it's something sometimes you take for granted. People such as ourselves that we embrace the need to understand violence, to utilize violence, but
Yeah.
in a way that we believe is I call it fighting the righteous fight, right?
Yeah.
Protecting myself, protecting others from people that would harm and victimize them. But there are other people that don't make that part of their life, and so it's more important to get into the mindset of violence and
Yeah.
understanding and making those decisions before it happens, because when it happens,
Mm.
that's too late. You're ready or you're not. But and you got to make that. You got to do it or you don't. But if you haven't really thought that through before things happen, then sometimes people can go into what we call sometimes condition black. We've got
Yeah.
condition
Yeah.
white where
Absolutely
you're just
frozen.
like
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
condition black we just freeze. The fight, flight, or freeze thing. And so
Yeah.
if you haven't thought it through, you're more likely to fall into the freeze and they're the fight or flee. And so
Yeah.
and it has to be a rational fight or flight. Maybe you fight
Yeah.
when you should have fled. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
vice versa. So
Yeah. That's
so
good.
yeah, I think those are things that are extremely important, and understanding them. If you've never really thought that through or had that kind of taught to you, and
Yeah.
then putting people through stressful scenarios that can that term is used often, which is stress inoculation.
Yeah.
And I think it's a valid term. Getting people that sport martial artists, they through by virtue of sparring on a regular basis, they've
Yeah.
inoculated themselves to the stress of that physical conflict, and so
Yeah.
they can you become more cool, calm, and collective under stress, and more likely to make good, sound decisions.
Yeah. Although it's a bit different, the sportive platform where it's consensual, you touch glove or you go there, you're grappling, you know what's happening. As
Yes.
for the situation outside, it's like straight away it comes from an emotional platform. Well, now you're like, oh shit, who am I dealing with? Has he got a weapon? Has he got mates? Has it?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Now you're like, you
Exactly.
don't know. It's completely a different animal. Yeah.
Absolutely, it is. And I oftentimes when I kind of explain that relationship, I'll use like the overlapping circles. Right, you've got the sport, you've got the combat. There's
Yeah.
that big overlap where one training in one is going to help the other, but there's all that area that you should be studying. If you're a sport fighter and you want to understand the reality of self-defense, there's areas that you don't train when you're training for sport,
True.
and vice versa. The skills of someone that wants to understand self-defense, but you don't do some of the skills and drills that a sport fighter does, you'll never get some
Mm.
of those skills that they have. And so there's an overlap of that, but there's also separate areas too.
One thing that you said earlier on about the role play, it's something we did a lot of, role play in order to learn how to use de-escalation tactics and, think what are we going to need, what are we going to use. And one thing that I found out, now that we're talking about sports fighters and people training self-protection, is that when I teach people to go from language brain to fighting brain, so from neocortex, prefrontal lobe to limbic system, in a fraction of second, sometimes they got difficulties with it. So I got one guy that trains with me that's a really accomplished boxer. The guy is his eye-hand coordination is just crazy. I put the pads on and he'll hit it every time with a lot of power, a lot of speed. As soon as we do role play and we start talking, there start to be some dialogue. There starts to be some deceptive dialogue and deceptive kinesis and all that stuff. And then I give him the cue, the pre-threat indicator, and he needs to go through the pad. Very often he missed the first. The first shot is not as accurate because he's not used to go from language brain to fighting brain in a fraction of a second. And
Yeah.
that's why I think it's important to kind of merge the two.
Exactly. No, I agree. I agree. You've got some. I've seen that oftentimes where people, like you said, they're accomplished in a particular martial art, but then there's a disconnect when you start going through, adding like the interaction, the verbal interaction, and then the escalation, de-escalation, the decision making. It's stuff that is, if you haven't incorporated into your training, it's going to throw you. It's just going to discombobulate you. It's going to throw you off.
So you spoke about mindset, and now this is a massive topic in the world of combatives because this is your it's like your emotional software, and if the emotional software is not correctly installed and it's not operational, then the physical hardware is useless basically. So in terms of mental and emotional preparation, how would you rate the importance of cultivating the right mindset, and how do you do that with your students? Because
it's essential. It's one of those things that has to be at some point in time has to be has to be trained, has to be it's again sometimes, and I fall into the same thing. Sometimes I take for granted the importance of it because it's just the people that I surround myself. We have that mindset, and we have and it's something that's just bred into us, but there are people that don't, and so it's an important thing that you have to get people to understand. Am I capable of violence? Make that decision before you're put into that position, and what I have to fight for, what is going to make me be violent. Well, if someone's trying to hurt me, take me away from my loved ones, if someone's trying to hurt one of my loved ones or someone that I have a duty to protect, what measures am I going to go to actually prevent that? And to include the use of violence. And so all of that has to be thought through and trained and taught to people that might not have that warrior mindset of just doing what you got to do sometimes. And so I think it's essential. And I actually do, and this going back to a lot of this is going back to my days as when I was a police academy instructor. I have lesson plans, PowerPoint based lesson plans. It always the last when you go through that, the last PowerPoint is always a picture of my family, right? And that's my this is what I have to fight for. I want you to think about what do you have to fight for? Are you going to let someone take you away from those people, or take them away from you? And then what will you do to prevent that? And have people think that through beforehand, but understanding also that what sets us apart from the sociopaths and the criminal element of society is the ability to turn it on, but we need to be able to turn it off, right? And have controlled aggression. I can be aggressive too, but it's going to be controlled, and I'm going to do my best to make sure that's within the bounds of the law.
Call it like controlled, cold, clinical aggression, like something on a switch, something you can access on a switch.
Sure.
What I like to do to train now, the way that I teach it, or one of the way, is I'm in front of the mirror. Obviously, do that when you're alone. Do you know what I mean? Obviously, if you got people around you, they're gonna think there's something wrong with you. But you put yourself in a soft mental and emotional state. So I'm going in the mirror and I'm just smiling and I'm just talking. I'm de-escalating. I'm just talking and I'm smiling. And I go from soft mental emotional state to hard mental emotional state in a fraction of a second. But it's like I flick the switch on and flick it off straight away. So I'm like smiling and boom, and then I'll go back to my smiling. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You kind of learn to flick that switch on and off, on and off, on and off. Or I like to use the analogy of the dragon in the cave. We all have a dragon in our cave, and we need to learn to put it on the leash, get it out, do the job, and just pull it back to put it back in the cave. Or sometimes it's like thinking like a criminal, thinking like a soldier, thinking like a predator. But a predator doesn't belong in in society. So what do? We put that predator inside a cell. We got that cell somewhere in our mind, and we put that predator, that criminal, that killer, whatever you want to call it, put it in that cell and keep it in that cell until you actually need it, and you release it. And that's like your supra state. That's like your alter ego persona, this individual that you access when you need to fight for your life, basically. Not who you are every day, but just who you're prepared to be at that very moment. So it's always,
That's great. I like
every
it.
mother is a killer.
Yeah,
Every mother is a killer, because if you threaten to take their children, then straight away they shift. You see
yeah,
that. So yeah, no, that's very, very important.
yeah.
So another question, I'm pretty sure you have, but did you have to use your skill set in real life situations?
Yeah, many times. Yeah, many
Yeah.
times. Going back to even before I was a police officer, I was a doorman went to university in Hawaii, and was a very poor student, and worked as a doorman at a nightclub in Honolulu, Hawaii, for a few years. And before that, I grew up playing rugby in New Zealand, and so back then fighting was part of the game. So it was like it was things are a little more professional these days. I think you don't see as many fights as there used to be on the
Yeah.
field, but maybe they still are at lower levels. But so growing up, absolutely from childhood through to my profession as a law enforcement officer in different capacities. So
Do you think, I always think that it's important to have real life experience. That's why I went to work the doors. That's what I went to search for myself, search for those skills in real life, to see how I was dealing with violence, how violence occurred, how I deal with my adrenaline. But do you think it is necessary? I think it is, in order to be a good instructor and provide realistic answers, that you need this real life.
I think it's valuable. Yes, I do. I think there's some great instructors out there that might not have that experience, but I think
Mm,
it's valuable because you're able to start putting things through a filter that you don't
yeah,
have otherwise. I
mm,
think that's for me. Growing up doing some traditional martial arts and continuing to train traditional martial arts, but if I didn't have that filter of experience,
mm,
then it's going to be harder for me to understand. Okay, this is what I think is really going to work, and this is what I think is going to take a little more skill, higher skill level, so on and so forth, or maybe it's not going to work at all. But I think it's a great filter to have, to put things, your information that you're processing as you train in different arts and whatnot. I think it's a filter that's very valuable,
yeah,
absolutely. And I
yeah,
think it adds a lot of value to an instructor when they have that type of experience. Absolutely. Like I said, there's great instructors out there, maybe never had a fight in their life, but they're maybe a coaching for certain things, but they're not going to be able to bring that personal experience to the plate also.
mm.
Yeah.
No, and I know it made me throw pretty much 90% of what I used to do. You know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. It's,
when you have a massive toolbox full of tools that you attach value to these tools, because that's your karate training, that's your silat training, that's your Thai boxing. I think Thai boxing and boxing is great. I never really left those tools, but like more traditional martial arts, and I'm not putting them down in any way, because that's what started me, from the age of 4. But a lot of stuff I thrown away, a lot of stuff I
well,
stopped
it's,
training it.
I'll be honest with you. Sometimes when I'm teaching traditional martial arts,
Mm,
because I teach traditional Filipino martial arts, and I know that there are parts of the art that I believe are higher probability, and there are parts
mm,
of the art that I believe are lower probability. But I find that there are people that are training, because there's the three areas: the fit, fun, functional areas of martial arts. Am I doing it to stay fit? Am I doing it for fun, or am I doing it to learn some functional self-defense skill?
yeah,
Maybe it's all of the above. Maybe it's heavier in one area. There are people out there that they just enjoy training the
yeah,
art, and it's for fun, and they're doing it for some exercise, be physical, and so they might not be putting as high value as the functional part of the art. And so there are things that I'll, sometimes in the traditional side that I teach that I understand. I'm teaching this, but this is not what I would teach out of the gate for a combative course, but it's still part of the art, and I think it's a lot of fun to train. And so so sometimes I'll teach it just because it's of who I'm teaching and what they're there
yeah.
for, but I'll leave it out if I'm teaching more of a combative program. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Um, let's speak about weaponry a little bit, because I know that's your forte. I love weaponry as well. I think that if you want to be complete, not only you need to be a, a decent wrestler, a decent striker, but you need also to be able to use pretty much anything as a weapon.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, and I know that once you understand the angle, the science of angles, and the basic body mechanics, it doesn't really matter what you pick up. It's pretty much all the same,
Yes.
depending on the shape of the weapon, the utility of the weapon, and the length of the weapon
Yeah.
changes. But
Yeah.
so in the Filipinos, you do a lot of stick. You do a lot of stick fighting, a lot of blade. I've seen you doing a lot of blade stuff. What what's one of the first thing that you speak about? So if you speak about weaponry,
So yeah, I mean, and like I said, I've since I was a kid, I've loved martial arts, but I was always attracted to the
yeah,
weapon-based
me
martial
too.
arts, and so I just love the weapon. And that, and in the Tricon program, the three parts are the striking, the grappling, and the weapons. But so as you said, the Filipino martial arts, and I call it the face value. What am I seeing? I'm seeing guys with sticks. But when you really understand the Filipino, I'm going to speak on behalf of Pikiti Tertia Kali because that's
Sure.
my forte within the Filipino martial arts. So within Pikiti Tertia Kali, that stick, although you are at face value learning to fight with an impact weapon, a stick, it actually is a facsimile of any contact weapon. It's Filipino Pikiti Tertia is more blade based. In the old days in the Philippines, they didn't have aluminum or polymer training
Yeah,
blades. The stick was actually, it represented a blade, and so and most of the Filipino traditional blades are the same length as your traditional stick, 26 to 31, 32 inches, depending on what art you might be studying. But that's so the stick is actually teaching you and there are nuances and that you mentioned that could make it more impact weapon, because when it comes to contact weaponry, you're looking at edged and impact, right? Those are the
yeah,
main areas. And edged maybe just puncturing, or maybe cutting, or maybe both. So maybe they
yeah,
have both of those properties. And then you start looking at, okay, what orientation of the hand, so that this impact would actually represent a cut if I had the blade, and start looking at some of those nuances. But really, it becomes very universal principles, overridingly universal. It's just as you mentioned, the differences are going to be the size of the length of the weapon, right?
yeah,
Which is going to adjust your standoff distance, what's going to be effective and what's not. And then the properties of the weapon. Does it cut? Does it puncture? Or is it just blunt trauma? Is it an impact
mm,
weapon? And those understanding those properties and what can do, what type of weapon will do which, and adapting between. When I train with a knife, it's a shorter weapon. It could be a short
yeah,
impact tool also. If I'm training with a stick, it's a longer weapon. It's
hmm,
an impact weapon, but it could also be a blade. Understanding those dynamics, and then it becomes just basically one system for anything you've got in your hand, and you can
yeah,
use. Yes, the weapon becomes longer and a little bit more unwieldy with one hand. Well, then you put two hands on it, and then
yeah,
and then it becomes the dynamic. The body mechanics start to change a little bit, but essentially you're looking at some of the, again, universal principles. So
yeah. You know that there's one type of weapon, or one type of impact weapon that really kind of changes. It doesn't change the body mechanics as much, but it changes the dynamic. It's when you start to have a lot of weight at the end of the weapon. So if we're talking about like war axes, war hammers,
a
those,
shovel.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Do you know what? I grew up in Eastern Europe, Jared. So the shovel was something that we did a lot. We had a lot of fun with because these guys, what they call by voice sambo, which is the combative sambo that they learn in the Russian military. They got a whole program. They got basically a whole martial art with the spade, and it's the little one, the foldable one
Yeah.
that they unfold and they fight with that, and it's brutal, mate. It's brutal as fuck.
I actually have one that was gifted to me when I was teaching a Kali seminar in Russia
Okay?
several years ago, and I have one. And they told me it was World War II
Yeah.
era. The short spade. It's not a folding one. It's a wooden fixed one.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
They got serration on one side. These spades, so they're actually sharp. Because they're not only for digging. They are weapons basically. They were built for that as well. Now
Yeah.
that's really cool stuff, and I like that stuff. Plus, the shape. Now you're talking about a different shape, and there's a lot of different things that you can do with it. But they like going for the knees with that. I love going for the knees with that.
Yeah.
Brilliant stuff. Brilliant stuff. How about CQB? So I know that stuff that in the US you got some really good people over there that are teaching that stuff because the laws are a bit different. Uh, I loved, even here I'm in the UK. The best thing I can do is to train with airsofts. You know what I mean? Do my dry fire drills, my mag changes, my transition from carabin to pistol, all basic stuff. Sweeping my house once a day, trying not to scare the neighbors.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cutting the pie. So, what about all that type of training? Is that stuff that you mainly reserve for the law enforcement,
I mean,
or
it depends on where. And again, I've 20 years of SWAT experience. It's a big part of my
yeah,
professional background. But I've also jumped on opportunities to learn from different, because even we're here within the United States, CQB is like a lot of times like the martial arts, where I mean, not doctrinally wise, right? Because it is fighting. Fighting is fighting. For me, it's all martial arts,
yeah,
right? But but there's lots of ways that you can go about CQB, and there's all these debates. Oh, this is better than that. Just like within the martial arts, you know what? Whatever you choose to do, train it and do it well, and what works, right? And so it's not saying this is better than that. Whatever you do, if you do it really well, because I've trained with Delta Force guys, I've trained with Navy SEALs, I've trained with, obviously with a lot of different SWAT teams around the country, and you'll see lots of ways to skin the cat, but it's about the results. Whatever you're doing, train it well. And for me, that type of thing, depending on what country I'm in, it's this type of stuff that I will teach to civilians. Or not, it'll be reserved, because sometimes it's that type of information might be restricted in a particular country, and so I'm unable to teach it and kind of keep a good reputation or stay within the bounds of the law even. But I'll go to a country like, I spend a lot of time in Brazil. My wife is from Brazil, and so we made that connection, and I've been teaching there for several years now. I speak fluent Portuguese, and so that's a country where violence is very real. A lot of bad people are better armed than the good people, unfortunately. And but good people can be armed. This new president that they have there is trying to take that away from good people. And I'm not going to get into Brazilian politics, but there's still a lot of legally armed civilians, and a lot of them want to train. They want to learn. A lot of them are on a team, so I can't take team tactics. 2, 3, 4 man entries and things of that. Or single man, like you said, I'm clearing my own house. I'm doing things of that nature.
Single man.
Exactly. Single man CQB type stuff, and but that's stuff that I'll teach, and I'll base who I teach that to based on more what country. Here in the US, it's perfectly fine to teach, and there's a lot of people that take an interest in that. So
And I think from all the stuff that I've seen, and I bathed in that as well from a young age. I think that the Americans are really good at what they do when it comes to CQB.
I think so also. I believe so.
Yeah. The people like Tim Kennedy, I love his stuff. I think Tim Kennedy was great. I got all his courses, sheepdog response, great stuff. But the Russians, you see, they're a bit crazy. The Russians have got completely different ways to deal with CQB, and they're doing stuff that, I mean, straight away when you go on a shooting range, you got the 4 basic 101 firearm safety, and you get that somehow, but they're not on the top of that as much as they are in the US. Do you know what I mean?
I think you find different cultures, the value of life differs. And when the value of life is low, then you don't really care if you've got someone killed in a training incident. And I know personally from firsthand accounts of Russian instructors here in the US that have shot people on the shooting range. And I'm not going to get into names or any of those details, but it's just, like you said, there's safety. And not just safety, the tactics. If you look at, and I'm not going to get too much into this, but if you look at the hostage situation in Russia several years ago, where I forget the terrorist group, they had a bunch of hostages in a movie theater, and they basically gassed the movie theater, understanding that a lot of people are going to die, hostages included, but a lot of them it won't kill. So the type of gas they use would knock people out, or it would potentially kill them. But it was still a valid option because it still was going to, some people will survive someone. From my understanding, all of the all of the actual hostage takers that the terrorists were, as they were basically executed on site. But those that of the hostages that were able to survive the gas survived, and those that didn't. And but it's just, tactics oftentimes are based on the value of life, and that's different from country to country. Yeah.
That makes me going. Are you familiar with the work of Richard Dimitri?
I'm not. No. No.
Okay. So Richard Dimitri is one of the top guys as well. I really like his work, and his stuff is basically into. You must have heard of Senshido back in the 90s.
Yes.
Well, he's the founder of Senshido.
Okay.
He kind of left that now, and he's into violence prevention, how to completely outbirth violence via criminal psychology, behavioral studies, and basically being able to spot behavioral red flags in order to spot various personality disorders, in order to kind of
Okay.
see it first and remove yourself before there is any before the violence even takes place. So
Okay.
that's new stuff. There's very few people talking about that stuff. He's
Interesting.
definitely but that makes me think, you see, in order to be a good soldier, what I'm going to speak about, some people might understand or not, but there's three main personality disorders. So there's the extreme narcissistic personality disorder, you got the sociopathic personality disorder, and you got the psychopathic personality disorder. And when we speak about psychopathy, everyone is thinking straight away about the end spectrum of psychopathy, like people like Hannibal Lecter in The Silence of Lambs, people eating his victims, people like Christian Bale in American Psycho, like some extreme psychopath, people killing people and seeing art or whatever they see. Their brain is not wired the same. In fact, their amygdala is kind of smaller. There's some study that are shown that. And there are various degrees of psychopathy, and it's said that 3% in 10, I didn't know that, 3% in 10 have got some psychopathic traits, tendencies. And so that means people like soldiers, a good soldier, I think, needs to have these traits, because how would you carry out an order to press the button to launch a missile on a venue where you know that there is an international terrorist that's going to be killing millions of people if you don't press that button, but he's got his wife and kids in the house? So now you're going to have to sacrifice maybe 2 or 3 innocent civilians in order to take a bad guy out. You need to have some degree of psychopathy in order to carry out that order. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, there's got to be, and I've not studied the science on it, but I agree that there are some, because there are people that do have to make those decisions and aren't psychologically prepared for it, and then kind of suffer,
post-traumatic stress disorder.
Post-traumatic stress is the big, is the big after effect sometimes of having to use that kind of, or even witnessing that kind of violence. But yeah, no, I think that some people are able to deal with that, manage that a little better than others.
So when it comes to violence, there's a lot of people that just focus on one phase of violence, which is the in-fight confrontation, the bang. The book, The Left of Bang. So the bang is the event, is the shooting, is the explosion, the stabbing, or whatever it is. And kind of a lot of people, a lot of instructors focus on this aspect. But there's always a beginning, a middle, and an end. So that there is pre-fight confrontation, what you can do before the event takes place, and post-fight confrontation, which is the aftermath of violence, be it short-term or long-term. So if we speak first about the pre-fight confrontation, I'm sure that's something that you teach. I'm sure that's something that you spend the time to speak about, the various type of awareness, like situational awareness, environmental awareness, behavioral awareness, personal awareness.
That's I first kind of heard that articulated from Tony Blauer, actually. And this is going back 20 years. When I was a police academy instructor, my department brought Tony in to run an instructor course. So I went through his 40-hour course back in, I think it was 2004. And I was a new police academy instructor. I was a 4-year cop at the time, and so I was learning some of these dynamics, and he articulated it well. But he called it the 3 fights. And the you versus you versus them, and you versus the aftermath. You versus the bad guy, and you versus them, I think is how he put it. But the you versus you. And as I've thought about that more since then, there's that it can be divided into many ways, because there's you versus you as far as just like the moral inhibitions of using force against, and then the mindset portions of that. And then there's also and so there's many ways you could kind of divide how that looks, because it could be. It could also be the you versus the bad guy, but it's more of the pre-actual physical conflict. And there's ways that in my Tricon program, I've got what I call an ACT model, and I kind of go through the three components of close combat. But the first part of the A is the awareness and the avoidance of the fight before it happens. And there's many parts to that. Part of it is just avoiding bad places, bad people, bad situations. And part of it is the verbal de-escalation skills, the ability to talk your way out of a fight. And so there's a lot of things that can happen prior to the actual physical fight. But so there's lots of ways that I'll kind of get into that. And based on time and who I'm training, I'll get deeper into that or not.
Yeah, that's really interesting stuff. I think that people don't speak about it enough. So when it comes to dealing with your adrenaline, and that is really part of the pre-fight confrontation, when you start feeling the effect of adrenaline, like tunnel vision, hyperventilation, decrease of fine motor skills, shaky limbs, time distortion, auditory exclusion, all that stuff. How do you actually manage to lower your heart rate, maintain your heart rate below a certain threshold in order to retain your cognitive function to a certain degree, and in order to retain your motor functions to a certain degree? Is that stuff that you touch on as well?
Yeah, it is. First I'll kind of, first thing I like to do is educate people, first of all, on those physiological stress symptoms, as they're often called, and what to expect. If you've never been taught that, then you don't know what to expect, what things could potentially happen. Like you said, tunnel vision, auditory exclusion, loss of fine motor skill, and things that, and the reasons for that. What is your body trying to do? How are these survival mechanisms? And understand that can happen, and then when you understand that can and will happen in these situations, then you can learn to manage it better. You can learn to even decrease the bad parts of those physiological stress symptoms through training yourself through certain training methodologies, stress inoculation type drills and scenario-based training, learning to become accustomed to confrontation and violence. And that will help you to, again, reduce the bad parts of those effects. And then focusing the skills that you train, like we spoke about earlier, on skills that don't require that fine motor skill first and foremost. Because I'll teach people things that could be considered fine motor skill, small joint manipulation and more, weapon disarms and things of that nature. But I'll put it into context where, I have this kind of big to small philosophy, whereas I'm going to go for big movement. I'm not going to try and grab your hand and pull the knife out of your hand. But if I never train a disarm, then I'm going to miss potential opportunities. Maybe I've got a 2-on-1, and I've got what I call stability of that limb. It's not moving anymore. So now I can more easily facilitate a disarm. But if I'd never trained a disarm, because disarms happen, they do. I've got lots of videos that show people in the absence of any training taking guns and knives off people.
Yeah,
they are realistic, but it's not my go-to technique. I'm going to grab that gun out, that knife out of your hand. I'm going to try and stabilize the limb first so that it's not moving anymore, and then maybe take you down, or maybe look for a disarm. If I like to put them in the context of where they should be, but focusing first and foremost on the higher probability gross motor techniques.
Okay. So do you focus also on using the environment as well? So you see,
Absolutely.
sometimes when you deal with somebody that's got a weapon, if there is a wall, you could kind of use the wall to your
Absolutely.
advantage. And
Yeah, there's a term I often use. People that have been to a lot of my courses will know that I use the term the omnipresent impact weapon, which is Mother Earth, right? So
yeah,
hit him with the ground,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that'll take a lot of. If you can do that with some dynamicism, that'll take a lot of the fight out of them. But it's not just
mm,
the ground. The ground will always be there, but I may
yeah.
have, like you said, I may have a wall or something that I can use, or something in the environment. So absolutely, yeah,
It's like what one other way of saying that is that you can't always take the weapon to the target, but you can always take the target to
introduce,
the
yeah,
weapon. You know? You'll never hit him as hard as the corner of the table when you smash his fucking head against it. Like,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. No, absolutely, absolutely.
So kind of going back to the pre-fight confrontation, and we've been speaking about the in-fight confrontation a lot, which is kind of our forte.
Mm.
What about post-fight confrontation? What about the implication of violence, the aftermath, be it short term? So now you just been in a physical altercation, you had to defend yourself. You might be wounded, but you're still adrenalized. So there is the think of kind of having this self-medical triage and just checking yourself for blood and things like that, which is one thing that people might not think about. You see CCTV, the guy got in a fight, he got stabbed several times, he didn't know, thought he got punched. He won the fight, and now he's walking a few steps and he realized that he's bleeding, and boom, he drops. That's it, he's gone.
Yeah.
So how, but that's the short-term implication. Okay, like, okay, you're wounded. Let's say now maybe you got to deal with the police now. The police has been called, you're still under the effects of adrenaline and it's visible. How do you go back from limbic to neocortex? How do you step back into your cognitive brain so that you can now speak efficiently and calm yourself down and be the good person that you are? And how do you articulate to a law enforcement officer after you've been in it? I think these are things also very interesting.
Yeah, and the answer to that may differ potentially
Mm,
from country to country. Here in the States, what I tell people, and this is coming from a law enforcement officer, because
yeah,
you are, like you said, that you may be there may be things that happen that you just don't remember at that moment in time, and you may not, and you may based on just the stress of going through this situation, you may say things that you didn't mean to say. So
yeah,
my recommendation is just to not say anything. To say, exactly, I've just been through a traumatic event. I need some time to gather my thoughts.
yeah,
Maybe or just say I'd like to speak to an attorney. If you say
yeah,
that to a cop here, they can't really ask you any more questions.
yeah,
It's done, But if you just say I'd like to just take some time to gather my thoughts about what's happened here, so I don't want to speak to
yeah,
here we have a constitution that protects your right not to say anything.
yes.
And there are similar things in other countries, but there are potentially countries where you just don't have that right. So I can't speak to those countries. But my advice is just to not say anything. Talk
Yeah.
to them the next day. Take the time to gather your thoughts, figure out
Mm.
what just happened, and maybe remember things that you didn't and you wouldn't, at that moment in time. So
It's true. Sometimes it's not what you do; it's what you say. Sometimes you can incriminate yourself just by saying the wrong thing because you're still
exactly,
internalized, you're still upset with the situation. No, that's a very good advice. That's a
yeah,
very good advice. Kind of take the time to get back to a calm state and now thinking, okay, what happened? Because always say if you're dealing with somebody and you end up hurting someone, obviously, I mean, I believe hurting people is stupid. Do you know what I mean? If you got the chance to walk away, to avoid, escape, de-escalate, that's definitely the first thing that you should do. But let's say you have to hurt someone, unfortunately, and now you have to articulate what happened, what you did. You might have to go to a court of law and explain what happened, how it made you feel, and every single step that you took, and how it escalated, and how it ended, and yeah, that is, I think it's very difficult to kind of control yourself, especially when I mean, I'm the type of person I don't get in fights. I've done the doors for quite a few years, quite a few years, and I'm always known as the person that smiles, that speaks. I'm the nice doorman, and then I got my colleague that's the doorman that just grab people and stuff. Not to say that I can't switch it on when I need to, but I've always spoken with people. I've always been good at speaking
Yeah.
with people. But if you have to hurt someone now, and it's like, how do you control that adrenal dump? Because I've seen that in training, people that had difficulties to access the aggression, and I had to put them through a some sort of trance state. I had to get them to lie down, close their eyes, and do some breath work to put them in a certain brainwave so that they were receptive to what I was saying. And I put them in a scenario where I gave them a lot of details. A scenario very difficult to imagine, where they get back home from work and they find basically a stranger with a big kitchen knife on the top of their significant others. You know what I mean? But I really take them through that scenario little by little, and get them to localize this aggression within them, and just get it out. But then that's one thing. Okay, it's difficult for some people to do, but sometimes some people manage to do it. But a few times I realized, I've noticed people actually, that's it. They stepped into their aggression, and it's wow. They thought it wasn't there, and I told them it's there, but now they couldn't get out of it.
Yeah.
So, do you know what I mean? That's another thing.
Yeah.
How do you keep control of your adrenaline? For certain people, I mean, if you train that, it's cool. But if if you're untrained, I think that's something worth talking about as well.
It is, yeah, and I've seen that in scenarios again, yeah, as a law enforcement officer trying to teach people that come into an academy, some of them never been in a physical conflict in their life, and trying to teach them how to switch that on, but also how to switch it off. And I've seen people that don't manage that well, and sometimes it takes doing some scenarios to figure out who has it, who doesn't, and who's able to control that, who's able to not even turn it on, and who's not able to turn it off when they do turn it on, and then managing it from that way. But I've had conversations with people that weren't able to turn it off, and just talking to them and talking them through, this is where it was legal use of force until this point. And then after that point, it became an illegal use of force because there was no imminent threat that you were dealing with anymore.
Yeah.
And you just started keep using force that was no longer reasonably necessary. And so, it's something that has to be addressed. It's a difficult one to address. I don't have a particular method of controlling that in people, other than putting them in that situation and then using a debrief to explain to them what they did, so they understand what they did, and hopefully they'll be able to control. But if they're not in situations where a simulated combat environment where they get a chance to experience that, it's harder to see who has that ability, and then also coach them on how what they did in a debrief after scenario, and what they should have done. And sometimes that's just the best way, is to have them do it and then debrief it and say
debrief at the end.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think, from experience, I mean, working the doors, when people get to a certain level of aggression, the best thing that you can do is choke them out, really. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But render them unconscious, and then explain to them what happened. But okay, now when you get people like that, when you do it yourself in training, and I know it happened to me at first in like pressure testing, and I'm like, oh shit. You know what I mean? Because if you continue, like you say, you continue stamping on some guy's head after he's down, now you're going to jail, because now all of a sudden you reverse the predatory prey role, and now you became a criminal. So I think that's very important thing to.
And that's something that to be honest with you, that's something that I went through prior to going to law enforcement, when I was working as a doorman. Before I was young, and I looking in hindsight, I realized I was doing things sometimes that I shouldn't have. That not just because they were illegal, potentially illegal. I'm not saying I was doing criminal activity, but sometimes I might have taken, things a little far when someone, some drunk guy's trying to fight me or whatnot. But also just realizing the dangerous positions I put myself in. After seeing more violence as a law enforcement officer, and people being, had their carotid artery slit by a broken bottle or something like that, and then realizing, I was in some pretty dangerous. I was in situations that I might not have survived, and I shouldn't have put myself in those situations. So yeah, sometimes it's just really understanding violence and makes you not want to be in violence. And like you said, you want to avoid it as much as. And I always tell my students, and then of course I said, the fight you will always survive is the one you've been able to avoid.
Mm-hmm.
So do what you can to avoid violent conflict, but sometimes you got to be ready for it.
It's true. It's very true. How about long-term implications, the aftermath of violence, post-traumatic stress disorder? Is that stuff that you ever had to face in your career with things that you have done or things that you've seen?
I've seen. I'm honest. I mean, I've not personally. I think I was able to manage some of that stress a little better than other officers that I worked with were able to manage. I know officers that have had to leave the job because of post-traumatic. I do know that there's something. Maybe it was post-traumatic stress. Maybe it was. But I knew that when I was a full-time police officer, I started to fall into a kind of I guess a mental state that a lot of officers find themselves, which is you start to distance yourself emotionally from everything that's around you. It's like you're in a bubble and you see violence on a regular basis, but if you don't protect yourself emotionally from that, then you're going to suffer, and everyone around you is going to suffer, because it is your experience, you're seeing, and people that you're experiencing violence on a regular basis. You start becoming emotionally detached, and if you don't manage that well, it destroys families, it destroys relationships. There's a high incidence of divorce and suicide in law enforcement officers, unfortunately, because of that. But people that can't manage that well. So I've seen it. I've probably experienced it to certain degrees, because I know when I left full-time law enforcement and was only doing it like I do now, a couple of days a month, I kind of felt like I was going through through a period where I was normalizing myself, and I was able to deal socially. I wasn't always hyper vigilant looking for people that are, I still am aware, but I'm not in the kind of a little overboard as I was, at one time. And I became more jovial. I joked more and with people. I didn't look at people and start profiling everyone around. He's got warrants, he's got weapons. I still want to be safe, but at the same time, not to a point where it's affecting me and those around me emotionally.
It's interesting what you're saying, because it's quite similar to what is taught to psychologists that work with criminals, like criminal psychologists, people that go and work in jails and that go and, like carry out that type of work. That's one thing they're taught, to kind of create this shield around them so that they don't get, so that, like you said, being emotionally detached somehow to what's happening because of all the stories that they have to hear. And I think that to work as a police officer, or even as a soldier, I think that's something that's a good skill. That's a good skill to have. But you don't want you want to, once again, that's something you want to be able to switch on and switch off. Because when you are with your family, you're with your kids, with your wife, you don't want to be emotionally detached at that moment.
Exactly. It is a difficult thing. But like you said, that some people have a mental switch. I mean, I remember when my first few years as a street patrol officer, I would get on the freeway on my way home from work, and I would mental switch. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going back to family man. I would even get home and not want anything to do with police to be on the TV. Someone's watching cops, turn it off. We've got this police show, turn it off. I'm trying to not think about that. It would bring back the stress of work, and so I would want to be around, bring some balance into life. But it is a difficult thing to manage, that that emotional detachment with actually still maintaining emotional attachment to the people that you should be emotionally attached to. So it's a difficult thing to manage, and so it's not an easy profession. Absolutely.
For sure. Like you said, some people are just ending their life doing that job.
Yeah.
So how about, I'm thinking now, so since we just marked the hour mark, to maybe shift into something a bit more peaceful, speak a bit more about personal development. And I mean, I know that's something that I'm very much into. I love that stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that, being an instructor and teaching other people is really about helping people to become better version of themselves. And even being a martial artist is really a way to become a better version of yourself. So do you implement some sort of internal work, things like Tai Chi or Qigong, or is that something that you're into, Jared?
I've never no I've never I have my meditation and those types of what could be equate to meditation. There are things that I do, and I know that there are other ways that people will do this. But for me, I've always, if you look at traditional martial arts, there's
Yeah.
always a connection with, and look at whatever country it comes from, right?
Hmm.
There's a connection with, there's always a connection with spirituality,
Rituality.
balance, and the way that I've understood that is that for martial arts, they all come from the warrior class in a society. That's where these arts are developed, and the warrior has to be at peace with his maker and however he understands that to be.
Yeah.
His spirituality, there has to be some a good warrior, and this is something even going back to the Maori culture, where we had a warrior culture where children that had showed physical ability, but also a calm mental state, ability to control their emotions, were the ones that were chosen to be dedicated to the god of war, and they were trained as warriors as they grew up. And that ability to control your emotions, to control
Yeah.
the way that you interact, but also, so there's that harmony, that balance, but also again, a warrior has to be ready to die, and that's the
Yeah.
way. And if you go, I just came from several museums in Europe, and there were so many wars. It's mind-boggling. This I
Yeah.
was in Italy, and go through museums and looking at all the weapons of war and all the wars that were going on here and there, and the warrior has to be prepared to die. Otherwise, he's not going to be a good warrior. He's not going to go to war. he's not going to take on the profession. And so, in every country, the martial artist has a part of that martial art where they are in touch with their spirituality
Mm.
and how they, as they understand it, and they have to be, because again, they have to be ready to meet their at peace with the fact that they may
Yeah.
be going to the next journey in the eternities, according to the understanding. For me, that's important.
Yeah.
I have my spirituality, the way that my faith, I guess you could say it, and I think it's an
Mm.
important part of who I am as a martial artist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's true. I think that's a very important aspect of the martial art. And what you just spoke about, kind of that meditation on death, it's something I spend a lot of time doing as well at some point in my life. Not so much now, because I came to that point where if it's my turn to go, it's my turn to go. You know what I mean? And I do believe that that's not it. I think that we carry on after. I think that there's some much more than what people could even start to begin to imagine. I think that that's
I
just a
agree.
tiny little portion of our existence.
Yeah.
But the meditation on death, of asking yourself, it's like, I remember I said that to people before. I remember when I was a kid, I can remember it. It's one of these kids memory where one night I was my mom came to tuck me in the bed, and I was crying, and she asked me, why are you crying? And I said, I don't want to die. It's like, as a kid, if I knew that it's bullshit, death is an illusion, like, what is that? Adults telling me one day I'm going to die, what is this about? You know what I mean? And obviously she reassured me, saying to me, you still got so much time in life. You shouldn't be worried about things like that at your age. And but I was scared. I was scared, and every time I thought about that point, and I thought about it, and I was so scared until a point where I did what most human beings do. They don't think about death because they're so scared of it. The thought of everything becoming all dark and existence just to fade away. I mean, that's inconceivable to me. That's inconceivable, because even when everything is dark, you're aware that everything is dark. So consciousness is all everlasting.
Yeah.
But I did meditate on that a lot, and I had a couple of 2 3 near death experience in life. One that was in a situation, and two that were triggered by psychedelics. Um, because I drunk ayahuasca. I went to work with shamans. I done a few things that really transformed my life. But how does your meditation with death looks like, man?
Yeah, no, and it's and I agree with you. I don't believe that death is final. My belief system and my belief system, I believe that it's just another step in an eternal journey. And
Yeah,
I have my again, I deal with it through my faith, my faith, and it was very interesting again going through so many museums the last 2 weeks in Italy, because so many seeing the dedication
yeah,
that people have to God and to their faith system, and what they will build and make and create based on that faith, for me is inspiring. But even if it might not be my faith, but I am Christian. I believe in Jesus Christ, and I believe in an eternal view of things based off of Christian belief systems,
Mhm.
and so that's how I understand and am at peace with what is next in this great journey. Yeah.
Okay. Do you know, it's funny. I mean, obviously, it's a massive topic, but do you know when it comes to Jesus and the various religions out there? Because when I had my spiritual awakening back in 2012, I looked into it. I was looking for God everywhere, and what was the best place to look for God? A church, a mosque, a synagogue. You know, all these places. So I went and visited all these places. I picked up the books. I started reading a lot. I read the Bible. I read the Old Testament, the New Testament. I read the Quran as well, the Zohar, the Jewish text as well. And then I got pulled into mysticism. So the Kabbalah, the Gnosticism, the Sufism, and all the mystical branches of religion, and I've kind of really soaked into all that stuff, and of course Zen Buddhism. Of course, you can't miss that. And what I realized is that the teachings of all these prophets are very very similar. And when you look at, we all have an inner prophet, and that's the heart. you know and so when you look at the teaching of Jesus, for example, they're very similar to the teachings of Buddha, or the teachings of Muhammad in the Islam, or other people before that. And so you realize that it's, I think, when I hear about Christ, it's really about a state of consciousness, and they call it Christ consciousness. Like cosmic consciousness, where you're more aware of your interconnectedness with everything, with the world, with other people, with the universe, and with the Creator.
Mhm.
And so, and I think, a lot of people are fighting. My religion is the ultimate religion, and when you really look at everything, you realize that it's all going in one way. It's all teaching you to be a good person, to love yourself, to love your neighbor, to do your best, you know what I mean?
I agree. I think if anything that teaches a man to do good,
Yeah,
to like you said, to be good to yourself, to be good to other people, I think is of God, and anything that teaches to the
yeah.
contrary is not. And
It's not.
so I agree. Yeah.
It's yeah. What you just said, it's like there is light and there is darkness, basically.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the path of the light is the service to others, and the path to darkness is the service to self. So basically, glorifying the ego and feeding the ego rather than feeding the higher self.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so people kind of got to make a choice what they want to do, and very often, people are just unconscious. When you think about evil, if you ask yourself, does evil really exist? It's like, I think evil is just unconsciousness. It's just an extreme level of unconsciousness when people don't know who they are.
Mm.
That's what Jesus said, forgive them, for they do not know who they are.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Yeah. There are people that, I think a lot of I think everyone is, to some degree, has a consciousness that tells them what's right and wrong, and there are
yeah,
things maybe more from nurture than nature, and maybe based on, like you spoke about some people's the way that they're born. It may be by nature, but I think in general, I think everyone is born kind of knowing what's good and what
Yeah,
has a conscience, what's good and what's wrong. But then sometimes people decide to go in different directions as they start to come into their own consciousness and make decisions contrary to what they might know and feel is right. But generally, I think most people are born to be good, have the
yeah.
capacity to be good. Yeah.
True, true. Because we're born in the heart. It's said that the heart is the first organ that forms, and then everything comes out of the heart.
Yeah.
Madness,
Yeah.
dude. Do you believe in angels?
I do.
So do
I
I.
do. Yeah,
So do I.
I do. I wouldn't. I don't think I could be a good Christian if I didn't, a believer in Christ if I didn't believe in angels. And so, yeah,
So do I.
absolutely.
Yeah. That's something a lot of people are like, what are these two guys talking about now? But yeah, I think that's something I've had a period in my life when I was like really on the low, and what happened to me, the best way that I could explain what happened to me was it was an angelic intervention. These are those beings that only intervene when you really, really need them, and when you're about to drift away, and they come and help you at that moment. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm with you. I think, and this is a difference. I think in different Christian sects, is some believe that there is no present day ministering of angels. It's something that happened a long time ago in the biblical times.
okay.
But I think God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I
I,
agree.
I think that this is who we eventually become, bro.
Yeah.
I think that in our spiritual evolution, I believe this is who we eventually become, either tormented souls, demons, or enlightened souls, angels.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's leave all that shit on the side, man, because it's not for everyone. Yeah. How about personal development? Do you actually implement things like NLP, neuro linguistic programming, or self hypnosis? Things that you use every day to help yourself? No.
I don't. I mean, I think the closest thing that and you talk about meditation, the
Mm.
closest thing that I would do that would, kind of be in that realm would be, and get. I know we're trying to leave that topic behind, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
prayer. Prayer for me is a way
yeah.
of meditation. It's communicating
Absolutely.
with, with our Maker, and I think that's a great form of medication. And it does. I think it helps me to, be a better person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's various type of prayers for sure, but when you look at things like the law of attraction,
Mhm.
we're
Sure.
like kind of manifesting the things that you want in life by visualizing it and imagining that everything that you ever desired is already within you. You just
Yeah.
need to find a way to align your energy field with the energy field of what you want.
I
Uh,
believe it. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. There's things that are hard to explain if you don't
yeah,
have faith, in some way, shape, or form. But that book, The Secret, if you've ever read it,
yeah, yeah. Of course, yeah, yeah.
yeah. But yeah, I think there's a lot to that for sure. Yeah,
There's a powerful saying that I have. I don't know if you've seen. I use a lot of self hypnosis and NLP. I got affirmations and stuff like that all over my wall.
yeah,
Photo of my daughter up there.
yeah.
But so there is one that I have that's called "What You Seek is Seeking You," and that is so powerful because it says what you want wants you. Do you know what I mean? You see, all you have to do is kind of knowing that that's my energy field. I am energy, and I am going to align my energy field with the energy field of what I desire or what I need or what I want my family to have or whatever it is that you want to manifest, and kind of believing in this and just kind of giving yourself as many details as you can so that it starts coming. I started to do that like 15 years ago, man, and most of the stuff that's on this wall now have manifested. So
I believe it through personal experience in my lifetime, and I won't get into all the details, but
mm,
that positive self energy, the visualization of where you want to
yes.
be, and then, is huge. It's important. For me,
Mm,
back before I understood that stuff, I was just dreaming. These are my dreams. This is what I want to be doing, and I was visualizing where I wanted to be, and then my life took me in those directions, and time after time, I was able to get to the areas that I dreamt of, and so I think there's a lot to that for sure.
yeah. You see what you're talking about now is exactly the same story with me, and I think that people like you and I and quite a few other people that are good at what they do, wouldn't be there without visualization, without a good mind that's able to kind of visualize, pictures. And I remember when I was a kid, I was putting some Prodigy on full blast. I was in my room. I was just closing my eyes, and I would imagine people coming at me 360 degree, and I'd do my punches, my block, my this, that, and I would create my own techniques just like that, and I would write it down, and then I would try it in real life. And like, without visualization, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I mean, I'm not implying that I'm any good. There's so many people that are better than me, but like,
You're where you want
visualization
to be, and yeah, and that's yeah, exactly, yeah,
is
for
amazing
sure.
too. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh, okay. I think we're getting towards the end, but here I'll ask you the last few questions.
sure.
Did you ever had any big moment of epiphany? Something that really changed your life, perhaps maybe from one day to the next, or like an event that took place in your life that made you rethink your life completely and made you change and become a different person?
Just in general, and yeah, is what
In
you're asking.
general.
Yeah, I'd say a few. One of them, some of the biggest life-changing events for me. One was becoming a father,
Yeah.
and those of you that like yourself that are fathers understand what I'm talking about. But it is one of those things that just your life. It's a life-changing event, and just understanding that it's not about you anymore, or
Mm.
and for me, prior to that, was meeting my now wife, who was I went through a divorce before, so this I did it right the second time. um, but it was my wife. Is meeting her for me was a huge, just a life changing experience. And so, and then having children. Those are two of the big. And then I've had other things that have. There was one event, and again, kind of related to what I do for a living now. But I
Mm.
was putting in a lot of hard. I was a police officer. I was going to night school, I did three years of college in Hawaii, but I didn't finish my degree. I just was running short on funds, so I came back to Utah, became a police officer,
Mm.
went back to school at night, changed my major, so I had to do 2 more years of school. So I was taking a full student load at night, working as a full-time police officer, trying to work some extra jobs on the side to make some money. And so I was just working really hard. I wanted a degree because I wanted to. At that time, I thought I was going into law enforcement. Sorry, federal law enforcement, where I needed a degree here in the States, because I was planning to test with the couple of agencies that I had in mind. I finished my degree. I worked hard, finished my degree. This was December 2004. The next month, January 2005, I was given a contract with the US Army training a special forces group in hand-to-hand combat. And if you kind of think 2005, there were two wars going on. The US Department of Defense was putting a lot of money into training for their soldiers. And so I got this contract, which on a cop's wages, it was a very good contract, and my whole life trajectory took a right turn. I thought I was going into federal law enforcement. The powers that be told me, no, that's not where you're going. You're meant to be an instructor. And it put me in a path where I was not only a police academy instructor at that time, but I was training special forces in hand-to-hand combat.
Mm.
And then my whole life took me to where I am today, where I
Mm.
realized, you know what, there's something to be an instructor. I can make a living doing this if and things. I had ups and downs. I've had ups and downs, and I still experience them. But I've been able to move forward in a completely different trajectory. So I felt like, I put in a lot of hard work to go to where I thought where I was supposed to go, but
Yeah.
God was telling me, you know what, this is where you're supposed to go. And
Yeah.
thanks for putting in the hard work, but this is where I think you need to be. And because it was just within 1 month of finishing my degree and planning to test with some law enforcement, some federal agencies, and then my whole career path changed. So that was another of those big, where I said putting, and I chalk it up to, again, put in the hard work, dream where you think you should be going, but sometimes be prepared for the big man upstairs to tell you that,
Yeah.
where you should be going. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
True. They say God works in mysterious ways.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. Any do you have any advice for, like, upcoming instructors, people such as myself, when it comes to teaching, when it comes to just doing that for a living?
You know, one first and foremost, and I think this is general advice. You know, you have to be successful in everything, in anything. It's got to be something that you're passionate about,
Yeah.
something that you're going to take it to the next level energy wise, and something that you're really going to put your energy into. And so that's first and foremost. You know, if it's not something that you're super passionate about, I can tell. I know you are passionate about what you do.
I love that shit, man.
That's very very open for to see, which I think is awesome. And so that's the first thing that I think is important. And then just putting your time and energy into into being for me. In the combatives world, being diverse in your approach to what your understanding is. I know what my strengths are in combatives. I know what my weaknesses are. And I try to work on strengthen my strengths, but in particular work on the areas that are not necessarily my forte.
Yeah.
Always look to be improving. Always have that be humble. You know, I believe I'm a perpetual white belt. You know, I'm always wanting to learn new things, and no matter who I'm learning from, I think there's always something cool that you can pick up here and there, and making yourself better at what you're doing. And then also looking at methodologies. I think I've got some good methodologies on how I teach, but I think there's people out there that have good methodologies also, and I like to see how people do things. And you know, and I think it's a compliment to them if I take some ways that they do things and make it part of the way I do things also. So, but also, in addition to working on your craft, understanding business. You know, if you're going to do this for a living, you got to understand business. And it's it's not something I was ever good at. I had to kind of learn to be a businessman. And it's something that is important also if you're really going to do this make a living out of it, is understand good business practices.
It's interesting you say that, because what you just said now is something that, like you know, it's not something I was thinking a lot about before. It was just me doing my thing that I love to do. And then, like you say, when you start thinking about, okay, you know, I'm 35 years old, in 5 years I'm going to be 40, in 15 years I'm going to be 50, like, where are things going? And it's true, for the last year now, I've started to kind of put that business cap on and thinking, right, I gotta think how I'm gonna market myself, think about digital marketing, think about all that stuff. So I started to do a lot of research. And I always say about, you know, people need to be good at digital marketing and marketing in general. So like my next challenge is to become as good at marketing as I am at my own craft. And if I can do that, then I can do really well. You see some people, and I'm not the sort of person, I don't like to trash talk people. I mean, if you ask my opinion about certain people, I'll tell you privately. Do you know what I mean? But I'm not the type of guy that just goes and trash talk people. I'm not like that. If I don't have anything good to say, I'd rather stay quiet. Do you know what I mean? But there's a lot of people that are doing really well and that are teaching very unrealistic stuff, right down dangerous, giving a false sense of security to their students. And there are people like that focus on a more realistic approach, people such as yourself. And you think to yourself, okay, these guys that are not teaching realistic stuff are doing well because they're good at marketing.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're saying, and I know I've seen that also, where people, based on their just marketing savvy, do well in the lack of any real good product to sell, and so a combination of the two. I've had to learn that through the School of Hard Knocks too. You know, just like marketing. Wow, I had no idea how important it was until I became got into business for myself. But it's such an important thing. But again, you got to believe in what you're actually teaching to. I'm not going to, give up. I got into what I do, and I believe you did too, because of your sincere desire to help people to be able to protect themselves.
What about other people?
It's about giving them some substance, something that's real. And so that's the key. So you've got a good product though, and no one knows about it. It's hard to make a living selling your product when no one knows what a great thing that you might have. And so that's where that marketing savvy becomes important, and understanding that too. So there are people that have great marketing skill but don't necessarily have the greatest product to be able to sell, but they do well based on their marketing skill. They would do much better, I'm sure, if they actually had a great product to sell with that marketing.
Yeah, for sure.
The combination of the two is important. Yeah.
Do you know that there is one thing that I think makes a good self-protection instructor, and straight away people are going to go, right, technical abilities, mindset, this, that. Now, just leave all that out of the equation for now. I'm going to speak about two main things: empathy and emotional intelligence. And if you got these two things, and you really care about people, and you're really kind of there because I know, for example, I mean, I grew up, I was bullied. I got autism. I'm on the mild spectrum of autism, ADHD, neurodivergent. I got all sorts of, do you know what I mean? And so being bullied as a kid, I know what it feels like. I don't want people to go through that shit. Do you know what I mean? And if I'm in a position to help people not go through that, then mission accomplished. That's what I'm here for. Yeah. So if people have that degree of empathy, of being able to put yourself in other people's shoes, and you have to go through the pain, through the suffering to know how it feels like. It's the same thing in martial arts. I spent the first 2-3 years with my father when we were providing like training for the military in Eastern Europe. He was twisting me up and all, I'd spend the first 3 years getting twisted up, like, because I had to know how it feels like to be in pain. And then, and then eventually you come full circle, and now you're applying the technique onto somebody else. And now you know not to put too much pressure because you know how it feels like. You want them to feel it though. Do you know what I mean? Because like to know that it works, you've applied the chokehold or the triangle choke or whatever it is, the arm lock, the wrist lock properly, so that it works. But you know how it feels like, so you don't apply that too hard.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm with you. I'm not the type of instructor that likes to, likes to hurt my uke. The guy that I'm demonstrating on. I'm just not. I don't see the value. So long as they understand how to do it, and they're doing it, like you said, to the point where we understand. Yeah, this is how it should be done. I can feel it, but I don't have to beat up my uke just to show people that it's going to work. I'm not that guy either. I have empathy. I don't like that. Yeah. And I don't really like that style where people are out there, beating the crap out of their rookies and for what? Because it looks, I don't know, it's not necessary.
There is a degree of conditioning and stuff like that. I'm a firm believer in conditioning. I mean, I do train to get punched in the guts. I do crack myself a little bit before training with the gloves and stuff, just to get in the get in the zone. Yeah. So I do believe. But it's not for everyone, and it depends who you're teaching. If you're teaching a group of women, for example, you're not going to go and throw, a big mawashis. You're just not going to do that, because it depends who you have in front of you. But you look at certain styles that are, hardcore styles. I know I used to be an instructor for under Lee Morrison. So it's a proper, UC is a proper hardcore style. And I love it. I think it's great. For a certain type of people, it's great. Is it great for Mr. and Madam Everyone? For the 50-kilo woman that's learning to fight off her husband, that's abusing her. I don't know if that's maybe a bit different here, but like you say, it really depends who you have in front of you, man.
Yeah, and it's understanding, how much force in the technique is necessary to show how it should be done, but also just balancing that with, just trying to hurt my demo partner for the sake of, the ooh-ah factor or whatever, just for the sake of hurting them. I just don't. I don't see that as being. I don't like to do that personally. I'll show it to the degree that people understand how it should be done. They can feel how it should be done, but at the same time, I don't see unnecessarily beating up your demo, your demo partner as being necessary. It's not me. Yeah.
Do you know? Then again, if you're doing demos with a fellow instructor, somebody that can take it, somebody that's on your level, then it's nice. Also, it's nice to be able to train and to do some proper nice demos with some
sinking in a little bit more. Yeah, I know I've got some of my demo partners, and I know who they are. where I can actually sink the technique in a little bit more, because they know me, I know them, they know that I've got the control to be able to stop at a certain point, and so on and so forth. So sure, it comes with with who you're actually demoing with. If I'm pulling my seminar host out that I've just met yesterday, and I'm pulling him out to demo a technique on, and he doesn't really know me as well as my other demo partners might, then I might balance that a little bit.
It comes with a mentality. It's like when it's somebody, like I was doing a martial art expo. Was it last weekend or the weekend before? Like a big martial art events in the UK. We got another one coming up as well, Festival of Martial Arts at the end of this month. But one guy was applying. I was getting him to apply some sort of choke on me, and he was shy, and I was like, "Put it in." Do you know what I mean? Put it in. When I'm hurt, I'll tap. Do you know what I mean? And it's a mentality. But I think that in order to get it, you need, to a certain degree, you need to have that mentality.
For sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Let's finish with a couple with a couple of questions that I ask everyone. If you could change something, anything, in your life or in the world, if you had the power of Almighty God, it doesn't matter. If you could change anything that you wanted on planet Earth or in your life, what would it be?
Hey, that's a deep question. That's a deep question. One thing I could change on planet Earth. I would, and this is, this answer is probably, as one of those absolutely never going to happen type answers, but just root out the evil that is in people's hearts. The desire to hurt and victimize and take advantage of other people. That would be, because that's why we need all this stuff. That's why, and that's why so many people suffer on this earth, is because of the ill intent of people that will victimize and prey on people that they perceive as being weak. And so that would be, that would probably be a big thing that I would first thing that comes to mind anyway.
That's good. That's good. And if you did that, who would we be?
Yeah, wouldn't need people like us, that need to be out there teaching. We'd be a warrior in the garden. So
we would be out of job. Like, we would have to just find another path in life. I've been thinking about things like that as well, man. I'm all about deep thinking. I've always been like that. Very last thing. If you have advice to give to future generations, if you had 1 million 5 to 10 years old kids in front of you, and you had to give them some advice, what would it be?
It'd be just to be a good person. Be good to those that are around you. Treat others as you want it. The golden rule: treat others as you want to be treated, and focus your life on doing good and doing your best and helping other people. I think if everyone was focused on that, then like I said, there'd be less need for people teaching things that like we teach. So the golden rule: treat others as you want to be treated, and do your best to be a good person and provide for those that need you.
Nice. Well, thank you very much, Jared. That was great to speak to you, man. I hope that people liked it, that they found it useful. Jared, if there is anything that you want to plug in, some courses, your website, some future upcoming seminars, now it's time to do it.
Yeah, I mean, all of my information can be found at jaredwihongi.com. It's just my first and last name, because there I have links to my Filipino martial arts training. I have links to my TRICOM training. We have, and I've got my calendar of events there. If anyone's interested to participate in anything later this year, we actually have a training conference in the Philippines. It's a Kali camp that's about 2 weeks, actually, 10 days or so, training on the beach in the Philippines. And so there's information on that for anyone that ever wanted to train Filipino martial arts in the Philippines. That's in late November into December, but there's all other kinds of events that we have on the calendar also. So take a look there, jaredwihongi.com, and there's links to the other sites that are involved with my training and whatnot. So
nice, awesome stuff. So for those that want to see this this interview again, or if you want to see some other interviews, all you have to do is to go on Adrenaline Combatives, the YouTube channel. In the live sections, there will be this interview and all the other interviews that I've done before. This is broadcasted also on Facebook, so Julien AC. Probably the best option will be YouTube, but if you want to share that or whatever, be my guest, guys. So I'm gonna let you go. I'm gonna let everyone go, and thank you very much again, Jared, for your time.
Thank you for the invite. It's been an honor. I appreciate it.
Same thing here, brother.
Take care.
Take care, man.